Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John. I am the event coordinator here at Murder by the Book in Houston. And before we get into tonight's event, I just wanted to let everybody know a little bit about what is going on with us at the store. As you know, we have been doing virtual events since April of 2020, but we're actually really excited. We've been able to get a handful of in-store things scheduled. So when you're looking at the event calendar on murderbooks.com, you'll see that events are either going to be listed as virtual or in-store. Next up in store, we've got Kendara Blake is going to be signing with us tomorrow at 2 for her new book in the Buffy world. We're excited. Next Tuesday, we're going to have Kristen Bird with us. She's got a really great domestic suspense novel that's set in Galveston. Greg Hurwitz is going to be with us on Wednesday night. And if you are cozy readers for tonight, I'm super excited. We're going to be chatting with Mia P. Manansala virtually on next Friday about her new book. And then next Saturday, the 12th, we're going to have Michelle Hillenklump in the store. Her new book, A Dash of Death, is about a former reporter who is starting a kind of craft cocktail business, and it's set in Houston. So I'm super excited about that. Her book comes out, and Kristen Bird's Galveston book both come out next week. So lots of really good stuff set in Houston. So I hope you will check those out. Like I said, it kind of depends who's touring right now, who isn't. Some publishers are sending people out, some aren't. Some are leaving it kind of up to authors. So just keep checking on the calendar to see what we've got coming up. And as we've been mentioning, it's been super fun doing these virtual events. But if you have, if you see an author that you love that's actually coming in store, please come visit them. We also want to let publishers know that there is still a need and a desire for authors to travel to. So it'll be important for us to get butts in seats and sell books for those events as well. But tonight, I'm really excited to be chatting with Juneau Black, who is two authors. The new book, Shady Hollow, which is the first in the Shady Hollow series, is super fun. While we are chatting this evening, if you have questions for either of them about this book, publishing process, any of that stuff, you can post those in the live chat on YouTube or the comments on Facebook, and we will get to them as we're chatting. So I am going to get our authors brought out tonight. I am going to start with Sharon. How are you tonight, Sharon?
I'm well. Thank you, John.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
It's fun to be here. Yeah.
We also have Jocelyn. Let me bring her out. How are you tonight, Jocelyn?
Hello. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. I'm going to shift us around on screen there for a second. So as I mentioned, Juneau Black is two authors. The official bio is Juneau Black is the pen name of authors Jocelyn Cole and Sharon Nagel. They share a love of excellent bookshops, fine cheeses, and good murders in fictional form only. Though they are two separate people, if you ask either of them a question about their childhood, you are likely to get the same answer. This is a little unnerving for a number of reasons. So to get us started tonight, I also wanted to mention Alan Bradley, who writes the Flavia DeLuce series, which, as anybody watching as a regular at the store knows, that we are huge fans of. Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie still holds the title as the best-selling book in Murder by the Book history.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We were really lucky to get to host him for like the first two books in the series. And then when we actually started doing Skype events pre-pandemic, he was actually the first one. So we've had a great relationship with him. He has said that this new book, Shady Hollow, is Watership Down meets Mickey Spillane, a mystery of rare and sinister charm. So if any of you are Alan Bradley fans out there, hopefully that will convince you to pick up Shady Hollow. But to get us started tonight, do you guys want to tell us a little bit about kind of what Shady Hollow is and how the idea for the book came about?
Sharon, why don't you jump in?
Start with the origins. Well, Jocelyn and I were both booksellers at Boswell Books in Milwaukee a number of years ago. And one night we were tasked with pricing these little finger puppets that were all woodland creatures. And because we were unsupervised, we gave them all names and occupations. And then we decided that we would start a story about them. And we wrote the story during NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, if you're familiar with that. During the month of November, you try to write a novel of 50,000 words. And so that's where it started. And at the end of our month of November, we had a story. Oh. And that was the beginning of Shady Hollow.
Yes, a very rough beginning. It was a very rough draft. NaNoWriMo is great for motivation. It is not great for polishing.
So writing process, how does it work with two of you writing the book together? Do you guys trade off chapters? Do you kind of, I know, because it's not told from different characters' perspectives, so it's not like you could switch off kind of characters. So how do you divide up the work?
We did like every other day. Like Jocelyn did even days, and I did odd, or vice versa, because we don't remember. But we would write our word count for the day, and then email it to the other person at the end of that day, so that they were ready to go the next day.
Yeah, and we usually like you might get to the end of a scene, but I think we're sort of desperately writing through NaNoWriMo, so we're just trying to get the word count on there, and then. If I at the end of my section, if I had some ideas, I would just put those in there almost like story beats, and then Sharon could pick those up or not. We mostly wrote in order, but there were definitely times where it's like, oh, here's an idea for a scene that'll happen later, but I don't want to forget it, so I'll write it now.
Yeah, there was no outline or planning or anything this first time.
Yeah.
So
planning for grown-ups.
So were either of you writers, were you working on anything before you started this, or was this like the genesis of you wanting to start writing?
I think we both, well, Jocelyn will tell you about her. I had done NaNoWriMo probably 4 or 5 times, so I have a couple of really bad novels on a computer somewhere, but that is the extent of it. Jocelyn is way more professional.
I had written romance previously and continued to write romance under a different pen name. So I was doing that from, I want to say, 2012 was when I first self-published a romance novella, and I've been doing that regularly ever since. So for me, it was more a shift in focus in writing the mysteries rather than writing romance.
I know you mentioned, or not mentioned, but I read that the books were originally self-published. So you can talk a little bit about the self-publishing process and the jump from self-publishing to having them out with Penguin Random House?
Yes, yeah. This is all Jocelyn, because she just sort of one day decided she was going to start a publishing company, and she did. And I'll let her tell you.
Yeah, again, this stems from the romance side of my professional life. I had, with the advent of the Kindle, it sort of opened the ability to self-publish, making it a lot cheaper than it had been previously. Because before you had to do an offset print run, you had to commit to printing 500 copies, which who knows if you'd ever sell. You'd have to hope that local bookstores would carry them. Mm-hmm. And with ebooks, it became like a much lower bar, which was very exciting for me as a writer. So I started a tiny publishing company with my husband that publishes me and and Sharon as well. It started as a way to get my romance novels out there. But having done several of those, once Sharon and I had a draft for Shady Hollow, it was very natural for me to take on the editing and sort of production for that so that we could self-publish Shady Hollow. And we had no sense of proportion. So we just went ahead and did it without any expectation of success. And fortunately, people did like it. So after it had a little life as an indie book, where it was championed by our ex-boss and still owner of Boswell, who he would hand sell them to anyone who walked in, which was fantastic. But then I will let Sharon pick up the rest of the story.
Oh, well, the rest of the story being we wrote 2 more in the series because we were having fun with it. And Daniel, our boss at Boswell, said, it'd be much better for a series if you have at least 3 books. So we wrote 3 books. And then Penguin Random House rep extraordinaire Jason Gobble asked us if he could show them to his bosses. And we were like, sure, go ahead. Nothing's going to happen. But, you go ahead. Thanks, Jason. And December of 2020, he said, you're going to get an email. I don't want you to freak out, but you're going to get an email. And we got an email. We freaked out a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. We got an offer from an editor at Penguin. So it was an unusual sale in that we never had an agent. It was just that we had built up a lot of connections and got to know people in the bookselling industry and really came to it through that. So, if you don't want to go the agent route, you can simply work in an indie bookstore
for a decade. Yes.
Just get really lucky. And then, that's easy peasy. So,
So were you both at the store for a decade?
Well, I was at Schwartz first, as was Jocelyn, and then I was at Boswell for 9 years. So that's my decade. But
yeah, Harry W. Schwartz bookshops in Milwaukee were a number of bookstores that had existed for decades, and then unfortunately did close partially as a result of the Great Recession. But we were very, very lucky in that Daniel purchased the one location that became Boswell Books, so that was able to continue under a different name. And Sharon and I worked at separate Schwartz locations, but then worked at Boswell together, which is where we really started working together.
So Chrissy wants to know, this is a good question, I should have asked this. So can you tell us a little bit about what Shady Hollow is specifically about, and maybe introduce us to some of the characters in it?
That is a good question.
We skipped right over that part. Shady Hollow is a community of animals who all live together in relative harmony until one day one of the residents turns up dead, and everyone is shocked.
Yeah, not just dead, murdered. Yeah, so it is very much a cozy in the Agatha Christie sort of vein, with the twist that every single character is an anthropomorphic animal. It is a world in which humans do not exist. So that is the quirk of this series.
And like you mentioned, the Agatha Christie, like for anybody watching, like it totally reads like that. It totally reads like a classic traditional mystery that just has, like you said, this little twist of the characters being animals instead of people. So what are some of the challenges of writing characters that are animals, especially animals of different sizes? Like our main character is a fox who's a newspaper reporter, and she's investigating the murder of a toad, and like the police, one of the police detectives is this big giant bear. So how do you handle like all of the different sizes of animals and things like that?
Oh, Jocelyn, you want to talk about the author's note?
Yeah, at the very beginning of each book, we do kindly request that the reader suspend their disbelief in certain ways. In terms of writing, we sort of took a vague note to ease the way, because the emphasis is really on the storytelling and the mystery as opposed to the real specific physics of the world. So when we describe, for example, Orville, who is the deputy police bear, he is a bear. He's much larger than most of the characters, but we really wanted to portray that in the way that you'd portray like just some big hulking dude, like sort of like he's the Jack Reacher of Shady Hollow. He's noticeably big. He's tough. He's what you would expect from a bear.
Law enforcement.
But, it's not necessarily as dramatic a difference as if it was a literal, seeing a bear and a mouse. It's just like, think of someone really big and tough versus someone who's very small and not tough. So we're kind of trying to find a happy medium there.
And I read, I thought this was really interesting. I think maybe it was in the Crime Reads piece, that while you guys were writing Because Humans Don't Exist, you were trying to stay away from phrases like a few feet away, and things like calling somebody like chairman of the committee, and using kind of those like terms that kind of specifically would point to people instead of animals. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Oh, that was one that we had to go through several times, because we missed things like handkerchief is a pawkerchief, which didn't always, we sort of didn't get that the first go around, and had to go back and fix that because it didn't sound right for our humanless world.
Yeah, and we were very lucky in that when we sold the books to Vintage, it did go through, all 3 books went through another process of copy editing, mostly to get it into house style, but also just to make sure that all the books were consistent in terms of the world building and things like that. So we were able to retcon a couple of things, which was really nice. But they have these fantastic copy editors who read
they are
very,
thorough.
very closely.
Thorough.
And I think that there were a couple of instances where they were caught a term and were like, oh, of course, that's actually really anthropocentric. So we should not have used it. And so we discussed finding an alternate term. I think the most obvious one Sharon mentioned, which was handkerchief, which is you cannot have a handkerchief because they do not have hands. So we had to work our way around or rephrase in a way that made sense within the world.
That's gotta be cool to have the chance to actually go back and, like you said, kind of retcon and just like clean up any like continuity errors and stuff over a course of a series.
Yeah, it was like a bonus. So we were able to mention some locations, insert them into book 1 that we had only come up with in book 3. With kind of making the world a little bit more stable, if you will. And
there's a map.
There's a beautiful map in the new edition, which we did not have in the first edition. So just like that, I think is another thing that we were able to do that felt like such a gift, that you open it up and there's this beautiful map of the town and the surroundings. So that was just like a really nice side effect of republishing the books with another publisher.
So since you were trading off writing, when you started, did you know, like with the first book, did one of you know who the killer was going to be? Did you figure it out together? Was it a surprise for one of you?
It was a surprise for both of us, wasn't it?
Yes, at the beginning it was, because we had no idea when we first started. And in the subsequent books, we got together and sort of planned a little bit what was going on. But that first book, no, we didn't.
We really just jumped in, and I think that was a factor of the fact that the setting was so important to us that we could really just get into the story, describing the characters and the setting. And we discovered the clues along with Vera because we did not know what the grand plan was. We weren't sure who the murderer was until I would say maybe halfway through, we kind of figured out what we wanted to have happen at the end, which is not to say that it was clean. We filled in a lot of details later on.
Large plot holes.
So having been booksellers previously, do you think that gave you kind of an advantage working on a book at all?
When it came
obviously,
to this, yeah, we're thinking.
Great.
Did you want to say something, Jocelyn?
She might be
frozen.
We might have lost her. I'm going to try to remove her from the stream and add her back in and see what happens here. No, I think we have lost her.
Oh, dear.
Let's see. Okay, I'm going to boot her from the studio. If Jocelyn, if you can still hear us, I'm going to boot you from the studio, so we'll let you come back in, and we'll see if that will fix it. Prevent. Okay, so let's see if she will pop back in. So while we're waiting for her to pop back in, Sharon, do you think that kind of knowing a little bit more about the book world while you were going into this helped at all?
Well, in terms of the self-publishing, because we had seen as booksellers a lot of really not great self-published books come across the counter, and the idea was for it to look as professional as possible. We did have a professional editor and a professional cover artist that Jocelyn used for our original books so that they would look as much like regular books as oh, there she is. That was important, that it not look self-published. We wanted it to look like it came from a traditional publisher.
Yeah. So Jocelyn, we were talking about whether or not you thought being kind of a bookseller and kind of knowing more about books beforehand kind of had, if that helped you at all. Do you have anything to add there?
I think that Sharon pretty much hit it. I mean, we were booksellers at the same store, and we talked endlessly. We can critique anything. So we would talk a lot about the books coming in and the covers that we liked and what was exciting. So I think that did play a pretty big role in deciding what we wanted our books to look like.
It also helped us we chose a pen name because we knew, as from shelving many books, that books with more than one author are inevitably put in the wrong place or under the wrong author. And so we decided to choose a pen name so that we would not have that problem.
Yeah, it's always tricky. We have because you'll always the store will have a way of Preston and Child. We always shelve them under Preston, but then if a person comes in and they're not sure which way it goes, and you're like, oh, I can't find this. Let's check this other place too, just in case. So how did you guys come up with the pen name?
That was we discussed what we wanted it to be, and partly it was an homage to Harry W. Schwartz bookshops. So Schwartz means black. So we went with black for that as a way to honor the fact that we both worked there and sort of come up through there. And Juneau is a reference to Solomon Juneau, who is one of the earliest settlers of Milwaukee, which is the city that we were living in. So put together, we have Juneau Black, which is unusual, but you can still spell it, which is so important about this book.
Very important, very important. Pronouncing is fun too. So John Lesquois, who comes to the store fairly often, but it's not spelled anywhere how you would think it would be pronounced, Lesquois. So people ask him all the time.
Oh, is that how you say that?
Yeah. So
I've always wondered.
Yeah, so it's not Lesquois, it's Lesquois, but
it looks like Lesquois.
Yeah, it does. So people are always asking him, he's like, if I could go back and do anything, I would pick a pseudonym for a last name because no one knows how to pronounce it. So he always gets.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's funny, early when we had just come out with Shady Hollow and we were selling it at Boswell, and I was working at the front desk, and this lovely lady came in and she's like, I'm looking for that Juneau Black book. And I was like, God, that sounds really familiar. What is that? I was like, oh God, that's me.
So all three of the books, so far, Penguin Random House, for anyone watching, has published the first one, and the second and third are coming soon. But they all have these really great graphic, eye-catching covers. Were those the same covers that were on the sub-pub version, or did they get new covers for Penguin Random House?
They got new covers.
Yeah. We did very much like our covers that we had for the indie books. We're really pleased with our cover artist, and they're very beautiful. But Penguin wanted to do a fresh cover, which very understandable. And I think they did a really fabulous job because it's difficult with a book like this. Our main concern when we're talking about it is that it does not come off as a children's book, because it is not. There's murder in it. So we want to have the animals there so that it's not a surprise to people, but at the same time, you don't want it to trend too cutesy. So I think that they struck a good balance with the designs for that.
Yeah.
So were there any other, did they go through any other iterations where you were just like, oh, nope, that's not going to work?
Not really. I mean, I think we were very lucky in that the first sort of vision they had was really what we liked. There were obviously some tweaks, and we had some suggestions. I think on the third book, we were suggested that it was maybe just a teeny bit crowded, and they were really responsive to our comments and really worked with us, which is really nice. But no, we were really lucky in that the artist is Perry de la Vega, and is amazing. I just really love the look of it. It's a little sinister, but still kind of charming. So,
So what kind of research did you guys do, or did you do any research into kind of animals and how they behave while you were working on it? Or did you just decide since they were going to be kind of, like you said, anamorphic animals, that you didn't really have to kind of stick to that?
I don't recall doing a great deal of research. The first book, we pretty much just made it up as we went along, but the more we got into the series, we did have to, it's not research so much, but as to keep track of who everyone was and where they lived in the town and that sort of thing. But that's not quite the same as researching animal behavior, which I didn't do. I don't know if Jocelyn did.
Yeah, I think we did concentrate more on their individual personalities as characters. And one thing we did want to be careful of is not, I guess, stereotyping the animals too much. You don't want to say, well, the mouse has to be scared, because that's sort of what you think of when you think of a mouse, I guess. So you're like, yeah, he's a little like our accountant, Howard Chitters, who we love very much. He's a little timid, but at the same time, he stands up for what he believes is right. And he does not just, literally run scurrying when things get bad. So we wanted to make the characters feel like complete characters rather than just, a set of bullet points for what you would maybe assume, a snake would be like, or a raccoon would be like. Our raccoon supports local theater, in addition to being
in addition to being a petty thief. Yes.
So Susan wants to know, she says, inquiring minds want to know, what gives the two of you similar childhoods from your bio?
We both, even though we're about 10 years apart, we had pretty much the same parents in that we grew up reading Agatha Christie, Sherlock Holmes at a young age, watching the PBS mysteries, the adaptations of the Agatha Christie's. Jocelyn watched Murder, She Wrote more than I did, but yeah.
Whenever we were in it, my parents were watching it, and that meant I was watching it, which now that I look back was probably wildly inappropriate, but at the time it did not worry me or them, apparently. And they got, mysteries and thrillers out from the library, and I just picked up their books and read them again, probably much younger than the target age on the book. It was funny that when Sharon and I started working together, we would just have, she'd say something that's like, oh, my parents did that too. Oh, I did that too. Really.
So we concluded that they were pretty much the same.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I want to ask too, like all the characters have such great character names too, but I wanted to ask about one specifically, Anastasia von Beaverpelt. Was that at all a Will and Grace reference there?
Not deliberately. But
now that I
mention it, the vibe is there.
So how did you come up with the other character names? Because they're all so clever and they're also fun.
When we are together, we sort of like would brainstorm about these things, and we're like far cleverer when we do that together. So it kind of, we would, somebody would come up with something and we'd tweak it a little. And the only one that came fully formed was Howard Chitters, and I'm not sure why. We did.
That was just the muse right there.
He looked like a Howard Chitters, and that's what he became.
But yeah, I remember like Gladys Honeysuckle, who is our gossipy hummingbird. I think Gladys just felt like a name that would be suitable to her personality, where you kind of think of this like chatty, gossipy kind of person. And Honeysuckle, it's, a kind of a reference to the fact that hummingbirds, sip the nectar from flowers and stuff like that. But we didn't want to say it's just Gladys Hummingbird because that was too on the nose. Honeysuckle was a nice way to hint at it without being super obvious, in the way that like Orville Braun is brawny, but it's still like a legitimate last name that you would find in the phone book, which again was important to us, that they felt like they could be pretty plausible names for people as well as animals.
So what was the hardest part about, we talked about kind of making sure that they were, they didn't necessarily have to have kind of physical animal traits and like things like, and not using the language, but what was one of the hardest things about writing a mystery from the perspective of animals versus just doing it from a human perspective?
We did have a hard time because we decided that our world has no human-made things, so there are no cars or vehicles of any kind, and that I always forget that when I was like, wait, no, I can't have that. I cannot have an ambulance or a moving truck.
Yeah, it's deliberately a relatively low technology world. Like there's typewriters and there's film cameras, but there's not, the internet does not exist. There's not computers. There's not, and particularly in terms of the crimes, there's no highly sophisticated forensics testing, for example. So our coroner comes in and he looks at things and tries to assess visually or what he remembers, but it's not, you can't just run it through a machine and be like, oh, well, the blood type over here is clearly evident on this speck of bone. So I think that was our challenge from a mystery perspective, is that a lot of the things that authors who are writing in the real world, modern mysteries, can rely on, we had to figure out different types of clues to make it make sense for the investigation.
And the upside is you don't have to figure out ways to make people's cell phones not work while they're doing stuff.
Yeah, we invented a messenger service, actually. Like there's these squirrels who run from one end of the town to another, because we did have to figure out a way for our characters to communicate with each other in the same room. So we did, we figured that like our society would find a way to do this. But again, it's not reliant on, like a telephone. So
And I love that Orville has like a book that's showing him how to like try to potentially solve a crime as well. I thought that was really fun.
Yeah, I can't remember when we thought of that, but I just loved the idea that he has this book that is also like not complete. So it's he's doing his best. He really is.
And so one of the things that's tricky then, like you said, since it's not the human world, the things that exist in the human world aren't in this world, you gave one of the characters a bookstore. So how tricky was that to not like put in like books that we would all know?
Oh, well, actually, building the bookstore was probably one of the most fun things. Because in the later book, we get to have author events, and we're really, really familiar with those.
Yeah, I think that was happening no matter what we were writing. But you're right. We kind of hint at some real world analogs. I think Lenore references Sherlock Holmes a little bit. Like she quotes what we as the readers would recognize as being a Sherlock Holmes quote, but she does not. I think she just refers to him as a famous detective. So we're hinting at parallels. And I think in in the third book, Vera does read Watership Down. And I think that, it's a book that is about animals. So if there is a book that is going to magically appear in both worlds, that's a good example of one that might.
And it happens to be one of my favorites.
Yeah. So we will bend the rules when it suits us.
So can you tell everybody when the next books are coming out?
Oh, Cold Clay, which is the second book, comes out on March the 1st. And then Mirror Lake comes out on April the 26th.
Perfect.
And there is a holiday short story that is only digital, and that is also available right now, but only as an ebook. So,
and it's called Evergreen Chase.
So can you talk a little bit about the discussion about how quickly they were going to come out? Was that always like since they were already written and all you had to do was, like you said, kind of tweak and copyright? Is that always the plan to kind of get them out pretty quick like that?
Well, that was our editor's decision. I think they wanted people to not have to wait too long for the next one in the series if they were already if they were into it. If they really liked the first one, hopefully they would like the second and the third. It helped that we had already written them.
Yeah, I think they were excited that it was an option to do, because it was a little, again, a somewhat unusual path to this particular publication. So in the indie world, we have a thing that we call rapid release, where you write a bunch of books and release them within a month of each other or within 6 weeks or something like that. So I think that this was their opportunity to try doing that as a traditional publisher and see how that goes, because I don't think they often got the chance to buy a bunch of books at once. So
yeah,
and
it's
we're very excited because it's all happening really fast. So we don't even have time to get bored. We're just like going through this whirlwind, and they're talking like we're already lining up events for the next books, which is great.
Yeah, Vintage they just were like Carter books, and they did them one a month too. There were 3 of them, so it was nice to be able to give somebody the first one. Like, if you like this, there's another one coming really soon.
Yeah, I think as a reader, I can sympathize. Like, oh, I love this book. Like, oh, great, you're gonna have to wait 3 years for the next one.
Or you're still waiting.
Yeah, looking at you, George R. R. Martin.
George R. R. Martin. That's what I was thinking of. Poor man.
So in the process then, how long ago did you guys write these?
We wrote Shady Hollow in 2010.
Wow.
And we didn't
We didn't
indie
publish it till 2015.
2015. Yeah, it sat for a while for many reasons. I moved across the country.
Yeah,
Sharon
trust me.
got married.
We went to grad school.
And went to grad school. We had a lot of stuff going on. So
Yeah, we had stuff happening.
but once we published Shady Hollow in 2015, we wrote Cold Clay the next year, and then put that out, and then wrote Mirror Lake a year after that.
Yeah.
And at the point that it got shown to the editors at Vintage, Mirror Lake had only been out for a couple of months. So once they had published, it moved quite quickly after that.
So I imagine it's got to be then. So like you said, you wrote it in 2010, and then even if it got published in 2015, so that's been a long time to kind of live with these. What's it like now, having to like kind of go back and remember the different books to be able to do the promotion and all of that stuff for them?
Well, it's a good thing that we had the editing process to reread them, because I was like, oh yeah. It's horrifying what one doesn't remember sometimes. But that was a nice refresher for us.
Yeah, no, it was good, and it was pleasant, because I was like, oh right, that was fun. I remember that scene now.
We were clever. Look at that.
Yeah. And it's good because as we think about the next books, we have the world sort of front of mind, so that we can make sure that it'll feel like it is the same world and not a huge break. Which is not to say that we won't be including some new things. Like Mirror Lake was written after a particular election, so there's a reason why we talk about the fairness of elections and the importance of civic participation in that book. So who knows what real world events will color our next book.
So while you were going through the editing process and getting reacquainted with them, did you create like a series Bible while you had all of that stuff that kind of there in front of you and fresh?
Oh, that would have been so smart if we had.
We have a cast of characters that is included in the book, which helps.
And we do have notes, I have note documents living on the computer, so I can refer to those. But man, find and replace is so helpful for writers, because you can. What was that thing that I talked about 3 books ago? And you can go and hunt it down in the document and remember exactly what it was.
Yes, that is useful.
Yeah.
So for each of you, who is your favorite character in the books?
This
is a hard question.
I have a lot of affection for Lefty. He's a little on the silly side. He's definitely a nod to the sort of 1950s hard-boiled thugs, because I was a big fan of Mickey Spillane growing up. Like, I would read those books over and over again. So there's a reason why he talks like a small-time gangster. And he's just a lot of fun. So I think I have a place in my heart for Lefty.
I do like Vera, of course. She is probably my favorite, but I also have a fondness for Joe. I put a fair amount of time in working in the food service industry before I became a bookseller. And I draw on that for the real life action that happens at Joe's Mug.
So you both mentioned reading mysteries growing up. What are some things that you have read lately that you've read and loved?
This is such a hard question, man.
Mystery wise. Well,
it doesn't have to be mystery either. Just
anything
that you've read lately that you loved.
Oh, well, I will say, I'm going to give you a minute, Sharon. I will.
Yeah, thanks.
I will say that I just read Lauren Groff's Matrix, which is not at all a mystery. There's some mystery in it. But her writing is so wonderful, and I just love it. And it is a sort of fictional biography of Marie de France, and it's basically medieval nuns against the patriarchy, and it's so subversive and beautiful. And if you're at all interested in the idea of a nunnery deciding that it's going to rule itself, check them out.
Excellent. I did just finish The Lincoln Highway by Amor Towles, and I love his books. And this is just a sweeping story about two brothers that are crossing the country, and I think it's 1954, and just wonderful, wonderful storytelling is it for me. I can appreciate beautiful writing, but I need a story, and I need things happening, and he delivers on that.
He's even though they're not quite mysteries, he's a big favorite for us at the store too. So we will periodically, even though the store is mostly focused mystery, usually if there's something like that, the Lincoln Highway that somebody just loves, we just bring in and sell. And we've sold tons and tons and tons of his too. So when you were writing this, one of the things that's fun, it plays with those kind of the fun tropes of like the little British village English mysteries and little cottage mysteries. So was there any point where you felt like you needed to maybe pull back, or was like that kind of like cottage mystery, like was that always the tone while you were working on it?
Basically it. I mean, we really knew that we wanted it to be small town mystery. It's deliberately, again, it's not the real world. So whether it is like a cute New England town versus a cute British town is kind of up to the reader to decide. Hopefully the readers of the British edition will envision a cute British town. But we wanted it to be familiar and somewhat comforting while still being a little bit dark. So we wanted to keep an edge where it's not, we don't want it to feel twee. So that was an important tonal balance for us to strike, which is why we sometimes have a little bit scary things happening, and a little bit there's suspicion among the residents, and there's a fear of the other, because that's a very natural thing to have happen in a mystery. And in a way that even though our characters are not human, they're reacting as people, even though they're animals, because animals are people too.
Yeah, I love this scene, once the murder happens and they're like, wait, this hasn't happened before. I loved the kind of running different characters to be like, okay, has the hardware store gotten locks in? Is there a new shipment of locks? Have you gotten yours yet? What do you mean you're not going to put? I thought that was a really interesting way to do that too.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of what we were going for, where no one's going to outright say what they're scared of, but they are absolutely going to talk. It's kind of next door, where everyone is just talking about, what are we going to do about safety? We're not going to say what we're afraid of, but we can all read between the lines.
Yeah, and I think that you did do a good balance of that, like where you said where it's not too tween. You do balance some of those kind of real world elements with kind of the fantastical look. It's a bunch of animals that are solving mysteries together.
Yeah, I don't know that we set out to write a cozy, but we sort of learned afterwards that that's what it was.
Yeah, that's the box it fits best into. But yeah, it's definitely its own little thing. So
I love that you're not alone there. I've talked to a lot of cozy writers since the pandemic has started doing these virtual things, and there are plenty of them that are like, oh, I didn't realize that like this is what I was writing until like an agent or an editor said, oh, did you know that you're writing a cozy mystery? And usually the response is, I don't know what that is. And you're like, oh, yep, that is what I'm writing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is. It's sort of one of those after the fact, like, I guess that's what we'll call this, because that's how we can convey the experience to a reader. And cozy is a strange term to be using, because back in like Agatha Christie days, like a cozy had a very particular meaning, which was that it was a mystery that occurred in a closed setting where all of the suspects were there, no one was coming or going. It was a small world. And now it has come to mean this more gentle, small town kind of thing that has like a very different vibe, I think, than what the term originally meant years ago. So we're just kind of figuring it out as best we can. And that's why we can lean on a marketing department that knows what they're doing, because we don't.
Yeah, it definitely hits that kind of, there's that weird, and I don't quite depends on who you ask, where that line is between like a traditional mystery and a cozy, and it kind of hits that sweet spot kind of right in the middle of the two.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think that is going to be about it for us tonight. So to recap for anyone who might have joined us late, we have been chatting with Sharon, Nagel, and Jocelyn Cole. Together they write as Juneau Black, and they have the fantastic Shady Hollow series. The first book in the series is called Shady Hollow, and it came out on January 25th. The second one in the series is called Cold Play, and it's going to be out in
March 1st.
March 1st. And then the third one is called Mirror Lake, and it is going to be out on April 26th. So I hope that you guys will check them out. As you guys know, as I mentioned before, like I'm the resident cozy reader at the store, and I absolutely love these. They're so much fun. So I hope that everybody will give them a shot. I've dropped links to the first one in the comments on both Facebook and YouTube. And I also dropped links to Matrix and Lincoln Highway if anybody's interested in checking those out. So Sharon and Jocelyn, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, this
You
was
guys
really
have a
fun.
good night. Take care.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, all.